Okay, so what we are doing is we're preparing the Southern style smothered Brussels sprouts and potatoes. And to me, Brussels sprouts are basically cabbage. And so the first thing I'm doing is, sorry about the noise and volume of water running, but the first thing I'm doing is rinsing them off, and mostly cool water, hot first and then cool. Well, really the first thing I did was clean the sink. And what that means is taking some bleach-based cleanser like Comet and spreading around, or spraying with bleach, cool water. Let it sit like 3 minutes, and anything that was in there that shouldn't have been in there is no longer a problem. Now, I'm saying I'm treating this as cabbage, and it's kind of the same thing. Now, you will notice I am using kitchen shears because that's what I like. And I'm rubbing these around to get the leaves. Now, I'm working in a sink that has a garbage disposal. If your sink does not have a garbage disposal, I don't know, what you normally do to get rid of food waste. Maybe you're composting. Maybe you're gardening. I don't know. But basically, in the same way that cabbage is, the Brussels sprouts, the leaves that will come loose naturally are leaves that have separated from the head of it, and they're not ready to be in the pot. They don't want to be in the pot. You don't want them in the pot. We're all in agreement. So let me prep the rest of these that are in my colander. This is about a pound, and these are a good organic that I think I got at Meijer. And so Meijer does have organic stuff, and the reason that organic is important is that it means that we can kind of trust a little better that bizarre and unusual things have not been used to grow it, hasn't been sprayed with things that you don't want to eat, especially in green vegetables, because they soak up so much all the time. And we just let that kind of peel itself in a sense. So we're going to end the Brussels sprout segment, and I'll show you the next one in a minute. So in order for everything to end up cooked, ready at the same time, what I did is I got the cast iron skillet out, and I am using an uncured bacon, which is the only type that I use. I don't even know where this came from exactly because it's in odd pieces. Bacon that's cured means that it's been packed with nitrates, and maybe some of the reason that we have high blood pressure is maybe not the bacon itself, but what's been done to it. Packed in nitrates means that that's like a super salt. Now the difference is it doesn't stay fresh as longer or good as longer, so you have to be careful when you store it. Now I have a handheld vacuum packer, which I will show you later, and these kind of uncured hot dogs or anything like that that I use, I'm able to keep it fresh a little longer. I'm going to show you something else. I turned the heat up a little bit because on one hand we don't want it to cook too hard and fast because we're really using the fat, or in the old days we used to call the bacon drippings, or whatever you want to call it is fine with me. But we want to render that off or melt it off of the meat, and we're going to use that to cook the stuff later. Now, if it's not enough fat to cover, basically it should be enough to cover the bottom of the skillet, I may add some, I have some olive oil that has got some kind of a garlic flavor mixed in with it. I might use that. And or other bacon grease that I have stored already. It as long as there are not meat bits in bacon fat or fats that you use, you can, they're safe to use for at least a week. But if there's little bits of meat in it, those bits of meat are what make things go bad, and then there you got a problem. So I can tell this is, you know what this is? This is, I don't know whether you all are familiar with country. I'm from the South, and so we have country ham. This bacon is actually cured the same way country ham is. And so with no nitrates, that means it's not as salty, but I'm going to say it probably is salty a little bit. So I'm going to render the fat off, and I probably am going to go ahead and add olive oil to that, but this will give it a very good flavor. I'm going to show you also, and I turned that down a little bit so that it wouldn't brown too much. This is the way I sharpen the knife. I use a sharpening steel, hit the knife with, I'm using a chef's knife today, and there's a difference. I think somebody else has probably already covered, or you have a handout that shows you the difference between a chef's knife and a Santoku knife. I'm not using that today because I don't feel like it. We're using this one. But in order to keep them sharp, I just use a steel, and I just noticed I've got the cutting board. It's very important that meat and fruits and vegetables are cut on different sides of the board because things can get inside. These boards that I have that are, I guess, lasered into the wood, I use that actually for the meat side, because if there are juices, they'll settle in there and I can get them off later. So let's turn this over before we do anything. Now I have no onions that I like. I like sweet onions, the yellow onions, that Walla Walla, Vidalia, or whatever they say are sweet onions, because they give a really good flavor and things taste really good. I just happen to have these gigantic shallots. Do not ask me where they came from. I have no idea. I think that it's basically, I work the peel off. You see, it's basically like an onion. You work the peel off and cut. I don't know whether I'm going to use this whole one or not. We'll see. I have these tiny new potatoes. I have scrubbed them very well, and we're just going to cut them up and leave the tiny skins on there. These are going to get sliced up so that they'll all cook at the same time. So hold on, we'll be right back. Okay, so this is called getting everything set up, or setting up your mise en place, which I don't know why we have to use French for these things, but okay, fine. So I had one huge clove of the shallot that I cut in slices first, and then I took the knife and cut across just this way, like one way, the other way, and that was a rough chop. I have these tiny potatoes that I mentioned before, and the goal here is any single thing that you're cooking all together is for the pieces to kind of all be the same size. The other thing is, I look at the recipe first that I'm working on, and the thing that is going to take the longest to do is what I start working on first. So the potatoes are going to probably take the longest, but I wanted to show you the slice of the Brussels sprout. These outer leaves are a little tough, so I'm going to give them a little slice across to make sure that everything. So it could matter, I guess, which direction. I'm cutting in the direction, as you can see, there's the stem of it, and so I am cutting like that, and with the chef's knife, as opposed to the other type. And I think I have a oh, there it is right there. This is the Santoku knife, and you see it's got a point at the top, and that point goes in first, and you bring the knife down and out. With the chef's knife, we're going this way, and most of the time that is my preference for cutting things up. So what I'm going to do now is, if our cameraman can follow me over, I have, as you can see, what I call a goodly amount of fat here. And these potatoes, as I said, are going to take the longest to cook. And so ooh, don't try this at home. We're going to let them cook around a little bit, and I'll get right back with you. Okay, what I am doing, if this had been regular onions, which take a little longer to cook, I would have put them in before the potatoes, and the recipe that I gave you did have that. Using the shallots, and if you have green onions, even more so, they cook a little more quickly. So we're just going to saute these things, and this is still kind of medium-high heat. I am using my trusty wooden thingamabob here, which I don't even know what it's called, but we're going to let the potatoes crisp and the shallots soften and brown a little bit. And while that's happening, I'm going to cut up the rest of the Brussels sprouts, and then I'm going to show you a little trick. Okay, I did say that I had a little secret, and one of the things that I do is when the Brussels, because the first word has an S at the end because it's after the country of Brussels, I turn that over when it's down to a wedge and do that, because I think what's most important is that they are roughly all the same thickness so that they will cook evenly. Here's another one of those very tough leaves. Waste not, want not, if we can do that. And one of the things that anytime you're cooking anything is always important, especially if you're chopping things up and so on, you got to look at the condition of what it is. If it's farm fresh, like this summer when you start getting the stuff from the farmer's market, and those things are fresh, they're going to cook differently than these Brussels sprouts seem to be fresh. And here's a little trick that we're going to do. I have some apple cider vinegar here, and I'm going to, if I can open the cap, I'm going to sprinkle. Well, we won't be using the cap then, will we? So I'm going to just freehand, but it is not going to be, let's not do it that way. Let's do this first. Let me get the seasoning on there first, and I think in the recipe that I gave you, we're saying we're giving it a few pinches, and so let's do that. Just get your hands all in it, and that's probably one of the reasons that I do have a nail brush, because I am using my hands all the time. And I know that if I pour a little bit in the palm of my hand, that is going to be enough. And why am I pouring with this. It is to brighten up the taste of it. It will cut the, you know, in the South we say it cuts the fat. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but for our purposes, and then you can kind of smell it. Does it smell like it's seasoned? Does it have everything that it needs? I might want to give this a little black pepper, but I'm definitely going to give it another good pinch of this seasoning. Yeah, there we go. Let the color change a little bit. And use my fingers to kind of spread it around. Let me say, you see what I'm using. I'm not using professional prep dishes or anything. I clean and sterilize, and what that means is I either put in the dishwasher on sanitized or very hot water, and then bleach, and then let it sit, and then cool water to rinse. But containers that things come in, that vegetables and things come in, I clean and reuse. So I'm going to say that even though these potatoes were so new that they did not really crisp the way that I would like, but you can see they browned a little bit, and that is all we need to make a smothered dish. We are gonna let that in, and what we're gonna do is I'm going to saute that around. I'm going to see if we have enough fat for it. I think we do. Again, what I did was just enough to cover the bottom of the skillet. Is sizzling. That is the sound that we want. And so this is just a saute or stir around. I'm going to cut the heat up a little bit. And it's kind of medium. The one thing that I'm watching is the little bits of shallot that cook differently than onions. And so I don't want them to burn and give us little bits of burned things in the dish. Nobody's gonna like that. Now here's a point where if you wanted to add some liquid, and I'm not saying water unless you have no other choice. One of the secrets that I have in the kitchen is I always have, and I'm breaking the Brussels sprouts up a little bit. If I do add a liquid, I've always got chicken stock or some other kind of stock. I use a boxed stock. If you have it in jars, which are very pricey if you ask me, those are good. And right now we're at a point where most of this has got a little fat all over everything. All of the leaves of the Brussels sprouts are beginning to wilt a little bit. We're going to keep going, and what we're going to do right here and right now is I'm going to turn it down. That was a quick saute. And this is cast iron. So what happens with this is that once it heats up, it stays hot for a bit. And you have to regulate the heat yourself, but that's okay. Now I recommend cutting this heat way down and then covering it. And let the moisture from the Brussels sprouts and the potatoes cook themselves. Now you may say, well, my goodness, where did you find top for this? I think this is a 12-inch skillet. You know what? I just had a top from something else. This is not like it's got to be all of that. You see the condensation building up. So it's working. That's all we needed. You could put a plate or anything over it as long as it's heat safe. So we'll come back to this in a minute when it's done, and I'll catch you later. Okay, the thing about any of this stuff, if you're using cast iron, by the way, you know that this handle gets very hot, so you're using something. It depends on how fresh things are, how your family likes it or how you like it. Around here, we want the vegetables to be a little crisp, and so for my family, this is about how it should look. This is almost like a stir-fry situation in a sense. So to finish it, I gave it a couple of twists of pepper, fresh ground pepper. And that might look like an awful lot of seasoning, but in my household, because there's not a lot of salt in the Dirty South seasoning, but this is the seasoning that we use in the Dirty South. This is the blend of things that we like. And if you have ever had things cooked, if you've been down south, you will recognize the flavor. So the bacon that is kind of crispy, I'm just cutting. This is why you gotta have these shears. I am cutting these little pieces up in here. You could even you could serve this over rice if you so chose. If you are vegan, of course, you wouldn't be using this. You could use ground, the Beyond Burger. You could use ground beef instead of what I'm using. Just a small amount, doesn't take a lot. Again, this started off as just a couple of, 2 or 3 pieces of uncured bacon. And when I started working with it, I discovered it was country bacon, so that had its own little flavor, and that's okay. And so, I'm going to give that a quick toss, and I think that, to me, is smothered cabbage and potatoes, except it's smothered Brussels sprouts and potatoes. I hope you enjoy this dish. One other little tip about this dish. This was done in a 12-inch cast iron skillet. I could have used a smaller saute pan. That's what that is. A nonstick would have taken a little different kind of heating and sauteing. And the other thing that I want to say is, while this was cooking, the other little hack that I have is that I was washing everything that I used, drying it, and putting it away, so that by the time the dish is finished, the kitchen is clean, and we can all sit down and eat.